My name is Robert Altonen, and I work with the Southeast Tennessee Resource Conservation and Development Council. The RC&D has been around for about 50 years with the mission of serving communities and protecting the natural resources of Southeast Tennessee. In those years, we've worked on projects ranging from litter programs where we've cleaned parks of historical trash all the way to restore communities devastated by natural disasters like the tornado that came through our area earlier this year. On the larger, more global scale, we've helped set up the Ocoee River for the water section of the 1996 Summer Olympics. Our nonprofit has worked far and wide, but one of the biggest projects near and dearest to my heart is the 319 grant program that focuses on Nonpoint source pollution. Through this program, we've invested over $1 million throughout the Southeast Tennessee region, focused on reducing the amount of pollution in our local creeks by funding best management practices in agriculture as well as septic system repairs. Now, if what I just said was a bit foreign to you, that's alright. Today we're going to be going over a lot of that non-point source pollution and what it is and how it affects us, what we can do to reduce the amount of pollution going into our streams, and the 319 program. I hope you all enjoy. One of the questions that I get asked a lot is, what is non-point source pollution? Non-point source pollution is any type of pollutant that gets carried over by rainwater to a nearby stream. This differs from point source pollution, where the pollutant comes directly from a source such as a pipe coming out of a factory that is discharged into the waters. As my professor in college told me, if you can point to it, it's probably point source. Knowing this, it's oftentimes difficult to know exactly what is brought into the water through non-point source pollution. Luckily, the state provides a list of streams that are not fishable or swimmable in what is known as the 303D list. The 303D lists those streams and what is causing them to be so polluted, and unfortunately, over half the streams in the state of Tennessee are on that list, with many others not being assessed yet. Typically, it isn't too hard to tell what's going into the streams. There's all sorts of tests for dissolved oxygen, sediment amounts, and E. coli population counts, but every once in a while, something pops up that makes local scientists scratch their heads. Let's take a quick look at the Sequatchie River. Parts of the river have unsafe amounts of mercury detected in the stream, which make no sense at a quick glance. There's no historic mining operations for mercury. There seems to be no records of any chemical spills or anything like that. The answer was a lot more complicated than many had thought. More than 100 miles away, coal plants in Alabama burn coal to power portions of the state, but it comes at a cost. When burned, mercury is released into the air. Those particles of mercury gets trapped in with precipitation and falls to the earth with water. Bacteria then digest that mercury, and it can move up the food chain, eventually contaminating fish and other wildlife. This is a rare example, but it shows just how everything is connected in our environment. While we as a nonprofit don't have the resources or the know-how to reduce problems like mercury contamination on that scale, we do know a thing or two about sediment, nutrient, and E. coli contamination, and that's where the majority of my work lays with the 319 program. A lot of farmers here in Southeast Tennessee, especially Bradley and Monroe counties, rely on cattle to bring income for their farms. While they are incredibly important to the economy, if not properly managed, they can deal a great amount of damage to the environment. However, with best management practices in place, we can reduce their impact while also helping farmers. Let's take a quick look at an example. Historically, farms would be placed near creeks and streams as a way for cattle to get easy access to water. Cattle typically stick together and will follow to the same point on that stream over and over again, kicking up dirt and making a mess in one centralized area. This reduces the natural filter that goes into the stream while also bringing in sediment, nutrients, and diseases into that area. A simple fix for this can be adding a cattle watering station to the field and setting up exclusion fencing. The watering station and heavy use area provides a clean area for the cattle to get water from, and better yet, studies have shown that cattle will get fatter because they are more likely to graze in the field and congregate near the water source. By setting up the exclusion fence, farmers are providing protection to the riparian zone, filtering out pollutants before they get to the stream. These simple, smart changes can make a huge impact on the stream's health. If you're interested in learning more about best management practices, Chase Hicks from the National Resource Conservation Services in Bradley County went over them in greater detail in a previous video. You can also contact your local NRCS office or extension office to get their expertise and help on your farm. Earlier, I mentioned septic system failures. For most folks, it's something that they never have to deal with. If you live in a city, it's likely you're on a sewage system. But for those in the more country areas, a septic system is how human waste is handled. Septic systems rarely fail. In fact, many people never experience a failure in their life. But when it does, the results can be pretty bad. Signs of a failed septic system can range anywhere between wet areas on the yard to human waste being present on the topsoil. It's not pretty for the homeowner and can lead to increased amounts of pollutants to go into the creeks, resulting in E. coli contamination. Because failures are so rare, it's easy to be overwhelmed. Septic system maintenance is a key part to owning a septic system. Every once in a while, it may need to be pumped out. There's a lot of gunk that may not have been flushed down the toilet that simply doesn't break down. Additionally, there's some services that offer jet cleaning as well for the field lines. If that doesn't fix the problem, it may be a failure in the field lines. Before any digging is done, it's important that you contact your county environmentalist to get a permit. They will draw up a map with recommendations that a licensed installer will need to follow. Because this is such an unfamiliar process, many people have been taken advantage of and left with unworkable soil due to an unlicensed, inexperienced person ruining their septic area. With that being said, what's being done to help folks out and reduce the amount of Nonpoint source pollution from going into the streams? Luckily, through the Clean Water Act, there's money set aside for this very reason through the 319 grant program. Nonprofits, cities, counties, and other organizations can apply for these grants. Projects can range to something as centralized to one specific section of a watershed to a number of projects throughout the entirety of the watershed. The Southeast Tennessee RC&D has been awarded several of these grants. Combined, we've invested over $1 million in projects directly related to benefiting both farmers and the environment. These aren't just for show either. Several of our grants have led to the delisting of streams that are on that 303D list that I mentioned earlier, and have been the subject of EPA success stories. In September, we closed out our Conesaga grant, spending the entirety of it on over 40 septic system repairs and 10 agriculture projects. In a few months, we will be closing out another grant, the Hiwassee River Phase 1 grant, which takes up the Shady and Little Shady Creek. With just these two grants combined, it's over $500,000 invested in 3 years, and we couldn't be more proud of the work that we've done. We are looking to add more of these grants in the future, so be on the lookout for more projects, especially in Monroe, Loudoun, and Bradley counties. Participation in the grants is straightforward, simple, and completely voluntary. For septic, we have to make sure that you've done the maintenance in the past few years and have completed a septic permit with the county environmentalist. And we will also be using a licensed installer. For agriculture, we typically work with the NRCS soil conservationists to build conservation plans for your farm. Cost share differs from project to project, but typically for septic repairs, it's 60%, and for agriculture projects, it's around 85%. That'll about do it for us today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. Stay safe.